Okay, so good morning. I got 15 minutes and I'll try and communicate quite a bit of information about what we see, what we're doing, what we're working on, and I think maybe how some of you can take advantage of it. So the first one is to just give you an update on Equinix, very brief, give you a few insights and maybe a strategy or two to potentially implement, and what we see are the most compelling. They're not the only network use cases, but they're probably the most compelling. So the first one, click, is, we've been around 20 years. We just celebrated a 20-year birthday. I've been at Equinix 10 years. I started there as a CIO. 10 years ago was a CIO for 8 years, customer officer, and now product. And watching this unfold has been really interesting. It really starts with the networks. So it starts with a lot of the people in the room, your companies, and around that was built content ecosystems. I always ask who had a MySpace page, because I did, because MySpace was an early customer, and now you can imagine the other content guys that are customers. Financial, they said, what is the best place to host infrastructure that has low latency routes? So that really began our financial ecosystem. And then cloud, which has been the fastest growing ecosystem in our history, which then became a magnet, a real magnet for the enterprises. And we've been collecting enterprises. It's our fastest growing vertical now. And really we started as a service provider platform, and now what we're finding is that it's a great platform for enterprises as well. And then we have new ecosystems that get built and they get curated, things like payments and IoT, and what we do is we see companies starting to formulate inside the data center, and then we learn what they're doing, and then we help them achieve their goals. But this is the last 20 years, it's been about building digital ecosystems. And this is where we are today. We have close to 10,000 customers. We're in 24 countries, 52 metropolitan areas, and we have now 200 data centers and counting. And we've connected those data centers together with a lot of your services and done some software overlay on it that I'll talk about in a minute. And we're up to closer to 290,000 interconnections. And so you can imagine the seeing who's connecting to who, where, why, et cetera. We do a lot of analysis on this data, which helps us build better products. And these are the customers that we host now, and what I consider to be the greatest ecosystem density and diversity potentially in the world. We go from cloud and IT, 2,900. We have 1,700 carriers. This is just such an important part of the ecosystem. And then you can see that enterprises, I remember when that number was in the hundreds, is now close to 3,000 and growing. And this is, in my opinion, as important as any product we roll out. This is really, really key, because you can find who you want to connect to at Equinix. So that's a quick overview of where we're at. So a few insights. So first of all, we're very, very fortunate. I think all of us are today, where we are and what's happening around the world. There's significant macro technology and regulatory trends that are converging, and they're forcing this convergence of physical and digital worlds. And it's happening in digital business, on both bookends. You've got digital business on one side, you've got business ecosystems on the other, which is really like a digital supply chain, which we've seen, but also urbanization, the need to provide services, digital services at the edge. So we're getting a lot of municipalities coming and talking to us about how they can leverage us to digitize their services. And then cybersecurity, data compliance, things like data sovereignty within country boundaries. This is really, these forces are driving not only a convergence, but also a need to distribute around the world. And not only is it transforming all these industries and these trends, it's doing it across industry verticals. It's not limited to a particular vertical. And when you look at the GDP growth, it's shifting from sort of the brick and mortar world to the digital economy. And so this is a study by Accenture that said, we're going to be seeing 11 billion or more moving online to more of as a growth engine for the global economy, moving from, as a share of global GDP, moving from to digital. So what is our strategy around this? So we see these trends, we see what our customers are doing, we have intelligence about what's happening around the world in different markets. So this is the strategy that we've been talking to customers about. And the strategy is that you really need a distributed network. You need a distributed network architecture for the digital edge. It seems sort of straightforward, but what they don't realize is that when you move to this architecture, the benefits are tremendous. We had a CIO of an enterprise tell me, he calls it the happy and frugal architecture, because he said, I actually got something better for less cost. I got a better architecture where I could actually distribute my network, connect to clouds, and actually grow my business. And we hear that a lot. And in fact, what we do is we've published these. If this is your key strategy, we've said, how do you do it? And so we have, and I would encourage you all to check it out, we have a site called IOA KB, Interconnection Oriented Architecture, IOA. KB is knowledgebase.com. If you go to ioakb.com, all of these blueprints are there. They're free, they're available, and it walks you through this process. And this process is what we've been teaching enterprises over and over and over again. And what we say is we say, look, you need to build physical and or virtual, and I'll get to that in a minute, network hubs around the world. You need to aggregate your local traffic for the various services that you want to offer to your employees and to your customers at the edge. And in the case of us, it's at one of these 200 locations or 52 metros. And what you do is you localize that traffic, you don't hairpin it back, and you optimize your networking at the edge. So this is sort of step one. Step two is to connect to clouds. We firmly believe that the architecture of the future, and this is, I'm a former CIO, but still heavily involved in that, is hybrid multi-cloud. That is the strategy for, I don't know any CIO that says, I'm not going to use multiple clouds to run my business. I don't know any CIO that says, I'm completely all in the cloud. It's a hybrid multi-cloud world. And so what we offer via our product we call Cloud Exchange is direct connectivity to these clouds, highly optimized, secure connectivity to these clouds. So what we tell these enterprises is we say, when you build and deploy your network hubs, use Cloud Exchange to access these clouds. Second, you know, the one downside of distributing your infrastructure like this, whether it's network or cloud or any other workload, is you're now making it tougher to really to control or to provide security. It's easier when it's centralized. So when you decentralize like this, you have to deploy decentralized security controls. So if you think about it, if you're a traveler and you've decentralized your VPN, you can actually, for roaming travelers, you can have your security, whether it's two-factor authentication or VPN or whatever other service you're offering, you can do that at the edge. And we have worked very hard in the ecosystem slide I showed earlier to attract the leading security vendors to offer those services. So these aren't necessarily services by Equinix, but they're services at Equinix. You've got to deploy distributed security controls. Fourth, you integrate your data. We see customers deploying what they call data hubs. So once they have that infrastructure in place, they actually now can push their data to the edge. And whether it's they're pushing it out or they're ingesting it in via IoT or any other use case they have, they're building these hubs, caching, multiple reasons. Some want to have that co-located with the clouds because they're keeping their data at rest behind their firewall, but they're leveraging, for example, the analytics of a Google or BigQuery or any other tools that Google provides on that data set, and they're doing that via Cloud Exchange. And so now you can integrate your data for compliant hosting if you have sovereignty issues, or just putting it next to the clouds where they have the apps you want. And so this is what you end up with, is a digital-ready infrastructure where you've distributed your network, you've connected to the clouds you need to, you've applied your security controls, and you've created data hubs all around the world. Now, it's not just physical. And so I'm going to take a brief moment to say, why virtual control points are becoming more and more important. But these are virtual control points outside of the clouds. We know that the cloud guys can offer some of these services, but some customers actually have a use case. For example, think about it as a cloud routing use case that says, I want to route data or workloads between Amazon and Google, and I want to do that at the edge. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you're distributing your infrastructure physically, there's time that it takes to do that, and that's sort of the physical world. What we're going to be implementing, we're in public beta here this quarter, is a virtualized platform where you can actually spin up VNFs where and when you need and do that in minutes. And that's directly connected to Cloud Exchange and Equinix Connect, which is the internet transit bandwidth. And we use our carrier partners to make this happen in near real time. And so customers are asking us to do this because they want to shorten the deployment time and they want to reduce CapEx. And they want to do this in markets that maybe they're not in right now. So it really does give them a virtual and fast way to test in a market. And this isn't just kind of BS marketing stuff. I'm not a BSer. This is one example of a customer who's done exactly this. And we've seen them do this. They started with 2 sites and 8 network service providers, 4 cabinets in 2016. You can see they moved to additional sites, additional NSPs, a couple of clouds. And then in 2018, you can see their growth. And you can see on the left, it's 80,000 employees, 9,000 locations worldwide. This is a big company. And they now have their roadmap laid out. And they're following this blueprint. And this is one example. We have multiple that are following exactly this. And so what are the specific network use cases? I got 3 minutes. One is you can interconnect with other carriers at the digital edge. So it's like a virtual NNI. You can shorten that distance. You can create your virtual circuits connecting to each other. And you can connect in the same metro or across metros. And this is done via a handful of clicks. So this is one use case. Another use case that I think is really interesting, in particular for carriers, is to be able to aggregate or consolidate the enterprises on one side of this fabric and actually bring them to your services. And those services could be any one of the services listed on the right. They could be any other value-added service, or it could be even to a cloud that isn't, let's say, on the Exchange fabric. So this is another one where we feel this is a way to provision circuits instantly for your enterprise customers. And by the way, many of them are on there. And we make available a marketplace, what we call marketplace, so you can actually see who's there, who's connected. And this, to me, is a nice solution to aggregate your enterprise customers. And it's all API enabled. So you can either use a portal to do this, or you can do it programmatically. And that's where I think this time to market and speed is important. And then this is really just a more generic use case that says if you want to ride this backbone for a period of time, and that period of time is, it can be spun up in minutes and torn down, you can actually leverage this software-defined infrastructure to connect to any of these 52 metros that we're in. And so I would end it in this last minute with, you know, there's a digital edge that's happening, and we're seeing it being driven by the convergence of physical and virtual. We're seeing it being driven by these trends that are happening around us, and we think it's gonna. We actually think when you put the advent of 5G on this, the edge is going to evolve even more, and you're going to need a fabric to be able to move workloads around. And right now, we've built a fabric and called the ECX Fabric. We're launching our network functions virtualization to really give customers like yourselves or enterprises and clouds the ability to spin things up virtually to really create their digital edge. And with that, thank you.